the continuity errors between this one and this one are a little bit weird, and I don't know if I would have done it that way. Yeah, it's just kind of weird. Hello fellow Aussians, and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to the marvelous land of Marvel Comics with their 1975 issue of The Wizard of Oz. This is Marvel Comics' The Marvelous Wizard of Oz comic. The first thing that I think you will of course notice is just how big this comic is. This is what's called a treasury-sized comic. It was first introduced in 1972, and believe it or not, it was actually cheaper for Marvel to print comics of this size so that they could then charge everyone else a little bit more money to get them. And this particular sized comic was around for about a decade after 1972. Besides the size, the cover art is absolutely wonderful. We have this picture of our Fab Four on the front, and on the back is the Emerald City. This particular comic is dedicated to Judy Garland. Now, at the time in 1975, it wasn't too many years since Judy Garland had passed away in 1969. I think her death would have still been on people's minds, especially with the annual telecasts of The Wizard of Oz. And, you know, the idea of losing, of course, the main actress from a beloved American film. So that's really nice that this is dedicated to her. Now, one of the things that I was a little excited about with this particular comic, considering its size and also it's kind of thick, is that I thought, oh, maybe we're going to be getting like deleted scenes from the original MGM movie, or maybe we'll get different parts of the book integrated into here. And the answer to all of that is unfortunately no. This is just a straightforward retelling of the MGM film in the cut that we have all seen. There are, of course, a couple of exceptions of things that they don't quite do that the MGM movie does, or they show us things that otherwise were not shown in the film. In particular, the way that Dorothy actually runs away from the Gale farm. In the comic, they show her actually going out of her bedroom window. Another kind of fun oddity from this and the original film is that Dorothy goes to the brush and wash-up shop in the Emerald City, but her hair never changes after that. It stays in the pigtails. I would guess this was done to make it easier on the artists that were drawing the characters. Another thing that's kind of funny, at least about the design of Dorothy, is that her ribbons in her hair are red instead of blue. The back of the comic features a little blurb about L. Frank Baum and the major stars of the MGM film. After this is a 2-page spread of the Map of Oz, and we will be getting back to this map a little later on in the video. Moving on to the second issue from Marvel, this is The Marvelous Land of Oz. Now, you might be thinking that we're going to be getting some interesting things in this comic since they have the authorization from MGM to use the MGM characters. But the only two characters that we get that look like the MGM characters is the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. So Glinda doesn't look like Billy Burke and instead looks pretty similar to John R. Neal's original illustrations. Another thing that we don't get in this issue is the Emerald City looking like its Art Deco design from the 1939 film. The Emerald City instead looks exactly like the way it did in the original Oz books as illustrated by John R. Neal. In fact, a lot of the drawings in this particular comic are lifted straight from the John R. Neal original illustrations from The Marvelous Land of Oz. And I don't think that that is like a ripoff or showing that the artists weren't creative. I actually think that's a great tribute to just how good those original illustrations were from John R. Neal, and just how much of an impact those illustrations had on the way that people viewed the original Oz books. The illustrations were just as important as Baum's text. Now, this is a pretty straightforward retelling of L. Frank Baum's second book. There's not too much that's deleted or just, as far as making it a simpler plot, but it's pretty straightforward. I was kind of shocked, to be honest. Dorothy is not in this version. They have not tried to integrate her at all, which is, yet again, interesting. So it is a little bit odd, but this is something that is addressed in the back of this particular comic. One good Oz deserves another, an explanation by the editor. One of the things that they mention in that particular blurb is that with the rest of the Oz series, with their comics, they will only be going with the L. Frank Baum books, but their depictions of the original Fab Four will stay as the MGM counterparts. They do bring up the Good Witch of the North being Glinda in the MGM film, and that Glinda in the Oz books was the Good Witch of the South. Because in this comic book, she does revert back to being the Good Witch of the South. The continuity errors between this one and this one are a little bit weird, and I don't know if I would have done it that way. Yeah, it's just kind of weird. But going back to The Wizard of Oz and the map that's in this book, Glinda's castle is in the Quadling Country. So it's so weird. It's so weird that they included a map of Oz that's from the Baum books, but has nothing to deal with the MGM movie, even though this one is just strictly MGM, but then in the next one, and presumably in the future ones that would have happened, they would have gone with the original John R. Neal map, and as originally written in the books. This series was never completed beyond the Land of Oz, unfortunately. They did start drawing and actually completed the drawings for Ozma of Oz, but they could never release that particular comic because copyright. All of the future Oz books were still held under copyright at the time in the 1970s. The film rights, if y'all remember, right, were still being held by the Disney Company at this time as well. So there were no other way of really doing Oz comics at the time of the rest of the Oz sequels, which is really unfortunate for the series because these two comics were a lot of fun to read. Now, of course, if you were to pick these up today, there are, of course, a couple of condition issues with these that could possibly happen. The paper that these original comics were printed on is a newspapery kind of paper, so be aware that the paper will not be pristine, white, beautiful 50 years on. My paper is pretty good. The colors are really bright and vibrant. But as far as these being like the comic books that you would purchase today in a bookstore, definitely not the same quality paper that is used today, especially for ones this big. And even though they didn't complete the series, I would definitely highly recommend getting these, as the artwork is beautiful and they certainly make a great statement piece in your Oz collection. Do you collect comic books? Comment down below. And if you liked that video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe. New videos are posted every 2 weeks on the 15th and last day of each month. And if that doesn't satisfy your appetite for Oz, follow the link in the description to ozclub.org and join the International Wizard of Oz Club. Until next time, bye y'all.